The Weight of Winter, December 1823, the Ashford homestead, Pennsylvania. The envelope remained unopened for 3 days. Samuel watched it from across the cabin, sitting on the rough-hewn table like a coiled snake, its wax seal catching the firelight. He'd wake in the night, Rebecca's breathing soft beside him, and see it there in the darkness. A rectangle of possibility. A door he couldn't quite bring himself to open or throw away. Rebecca said nothing about it. She moved through her morning routines with quiet efficiency, banking the fire, preparing what meager breakfast their stores allowed, mending clothes by the window where the light was best. But he felt her awareness of it, the way her gaze would slide past the table without quite landing on that cream-colored paper. Prudence was less subtle. "Are you going to burn it, or are we going to pretend it's not there forever?" she asked on the third morning, her voice sharp as the wind rattling the shutters. Samuel looked up from the axe he was sharpening. "I haven't decided." "There's nothing to decide. That man is trouble, Samuel. Anyone with eyes can see it. Anyone with eyes can see we won't make it to spring on what we have," he said quietly. Prudence's jaw tightened. She was thinner than when they'd arrived in October, her cheekbones more pronounced. They all were. Better to starve with our souls intact than feast on the devil's coin. Easy to say when you're not responsible for keeping everyone alive. The words came out harsher than he'd intended. Prudence flinched, and Rebecca's hands stilled on the shirt she was mending. The silence that followed felt heavy as wet snow. "I'm going to check the traps," Samuel said, standing abruptly. He needed out of this cabin, away from that envelope and his sister-in-law's righteous certainty and the weight of his wife's quiet faith that he would somehow make the right choice. Outside, the cold hit him like a fist. December in the Pennsylvania mountains was a different beast than the winters he'd known back in Philadelphia. This cold had teeth. It found every gap in his coat, every weakness in his resolve. The traps yielded nothing. Again. He was checking the fourth one, his fingers clumsy with cold, when he heard the crunch of snow behind him. Samuel straightened, hand moving instinctively to the knife at his belt. Ezekiel Marsh emerged from the tree line, his lean frame wrapped in furs that had seen better decades. The older man's face was weathered as old leather, his eyes sharp despite the frost clinging to his beard. "Nothing?" Ezekiel asked, nodding at the empty trap. Samuel shook his head. "You?" "Rabbit. Scrawny thing, but it's something." Ezekiel paused, studying Samuel with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You opened that envelope yet?" Samuel's jaw tightened. News travels fast. Josiah Black is hard to miss, and harder to ignore once he's taken an interest in you. Ezekiel moved closer, his voice dropping. "I know what you're thinking, boy. I know because I thought the same thing my first winter out here. Had a wife and 2 babies and the supplies running out, and a man offering me a way to keep them fed. What did you do?" "Took the offer." Ezekiel's expression was unreadable, "and I've been paying for it ever since, one way or another." Samuel waited, but the older man didn't elaborate. "What does he transport? Really?" Ezekiel was quiet for a long moment, his breath misting in the frozen air. "That's the thing about Josiah Black. He transports whatever needs transporting, no questions asked. Sometimes it's whiskey. Sometimes it's goods that fell off the back of a wagon. Sometimes—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Sometimes it's best not to know." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you." Ezekiel met his eyes. "What I will tell you is this. Once you start working for Black, it's hard to stop. He's got a way of making sure you're always in his debt, always needing just one more job, and the work gets darker the deeper you go. But you survived. Surviving and living aren't the same thing, Samuel." Ezekiel turned to go, then paused. "Whatever you decide, do it soon. This weather's about to get worse, and Black isn't known for his patience." Samuel watched him disappear into the trees, then looked down at his empty traps. The wind picked up, carrying with it the promise of more snow. When he returned to the cabin, Rebecca was alone. Prudence had gone to the root cellar, what passed for one anyway, little more than a hole dug into the hillside and covered with logs. Rebecca looked up from her mending. "Any luck?" "No." Samuel hung his coat by the door, stomped the snow from his boots. "Saw Ezekiel. He warned me about Black." "What did he say?" Samuel told her, watching her face carefully. Rebecca's expression remained calm. but he saw the way her hand moved unconsciously to her belly, still flat, but not for much longer. "What do you think?" he asked. She set down her mending. "I think Ezekiel Marsh has 5 children, all living. I think his homestead has stood for 15 years. I think he knows what it takes to survive out here. He also said he's been paying for his choice ever since." "Yes." Rebecca rose, moved to the window. Snow was beginning to fall again. Thick flakes that promised a heavy storm. But his children are alive to see him pay for it. Samuel felt something twist in his chest. "You want me to take the job? I want our baby to live." Her voice was steady, but he heard the tremor beneath it. "I want to see spring. I want to build the life we came here for." She turned to face him. "But I also want to be able to look at you in 20 years and see the man I married, not someone hollowed out by choices made in desperation." "Those might be the same thing, Rebecca." "I know." She crossed to him, took his hands in hers. They were cold despite the fire. "That's why I can't make this choice for you. Whatever you decide, whatever comes of it, we'll carry it together. But the decision has to be yours." The door banged open. Prudence stumbled in, her face pale, arms empty. "The root cellar," she gasped. "Something got into it. The potatoes are gone. Most of the turnips. There's almost nothing left." Samuel and Rebecca exchanged a look. The calculation was instant and brutal. What remained wouldn't last them 2 weeks, let alone the 3 months until spring. Samuel moved to the table. His hand hovered over the envelope for just a moment, then he broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in neat script. He read it once, then again, his stomach sinking with each line. First run, December 28th. 1820 Marsh Creek, midnight. Delivery, Miller's Crossing by dawn. Cargo, 3 crates, contents not to be examined. Payment, $50 gold plus $20 per additional run through winter. Terms, complete discretion, no questions, no witnesses. $50, more than he'd make in 6 months of farming. Enough to buy supplies, to last them until spring, to give his child a chance. At the bottom of the page, in different handwriting, bolder, almost aggressive, was a final line. "The cargo is heavy. Bring help you trust. And Mr. Ashford, choose wisely." "What does it say?" Rebecca's voice was barely above a whisper. Samuel handed her the paper, watched her eyes move across it, saw her face pale. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. "December 28th, she said. "That's 5 days from now." "I know." Prudence snatched the paper from Rebecca's hands. Her face flushed with anger as she read. "No? Absolutely not. Samuel, you cannot what?" His voice came out harder than he intended. "Cannot feed my family? Cannot keep my pregnant wife alive through winter? Cannot do what needs to be done? Cannot sell your soul for gold." Prudence crumpled the paper in her fist. "This is wrong, Samuel. You know it's wrong. Midnight pickups, secret cargo, no witnesses. This is the devil's work. This is survival. This is damnation." "Prudence." Rebecca's voice cut through their argument like a blade. "Enough." Prudence turned to her sister, betrayal written across her face. "You cannot be condoning this. I'm not condoning anything." Rebecca's voice was steady, but Samuel could see the tremor in her hands. "But I'm also not going to pretend we have choices we don't have. The root cellar is empty. The traps are empty. Winter has barely begun. So we pray. We have faith. We do what we must to survive." Rebecca's hand moved to her belly again, and Prudence's eyes followed the gesture. "I'm sorry, Prue. I wish there was another way. But wishing doesn't fill empty stomachs." Prudence stared at her sister for a long moment, then turned and fled to the small sleeping area they'd curtained off for her. The sound of her crying was muffled but audible. Samuel and Rebecca stood in the silence that followed. Outside, the snow fell heavier. "I'll need help," Samuel said finally. "The note says the cargo is heavy." Rebecca nodded slowly. "Ezekiel? If he'll come. He's done this before. He knows what to expect. And what to avoid asking about." "Yes." Rebecca moved to the fire, stared into its flames. "My father used to say that every choice we make writes a line in the book of our lives, that someday we'll have to read that book back to ourselves and account for every word." "What else did he say?" She smiled, but there was no humor in it. "That the trick is making sure you can still read the words through the tears." Samuel crossed to her, wrapped his arms around her from behind. She leaned back against him, and he felt the slight swell of her belly against his hands, barely there, but undeniable. A life depending on him. A future hanging in the balance. 5 days, he murmured. 5 days, she echoed. They stood like that as the storm intensified outside, as Prudence's crying finally subsided into silence as the fire burned low and needed feeding. Samuel thought about the envelope now crumpled in Prudence's fist, about Josiah Black's knowing smile, about Ezekiel Marsh's warning that surviving and living weren't the same thing. But mostly, he thought about the life growing inside his wife, and the lengths a man would go to protect it. The next morning, Samuel set out before dawn to find Ezekiel Marsh. The older man's homestead was 2 miles through the woods, and the fresh snow made the journey treacherous. But Ezekiel was already outside when Samuel arrived, splitting wood with the methodical rhythm of a man who'd done it 10,000 times. He looked up as Samuel approached, and something passed across his face. Resignation, perhaps, or recognition. "You opened it," Ezekiel said. It wasn't a question. Samuel nodded. "December 28th, midnight. He says I need help." Ezekiel drove the axe into the chopping block with finality. "And you came to me. You've done this before. You know what to expect." "I know what not to expect, you mean. I know how to keep my mouth shut and my eyes on the road." Ezekiel studied him. "You sure about this, Samuel?" "No." The honesty surprised them both. "But I'm sure about what happens if I don't do it." Ezekiel was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "December 28th. I'll meet you at your place an hour before midnight. Bring your wagon and your strongest horse. And Samuel?" "Yes? Whatever we see that night, whatever we carry, we never speak of it. Not to our wives, not to each other, not even to ourselves if we can help it. That's how you survive working for Josiah Black. You forget." "I understand." "I don't think you do. Not yet." Ezekiel picked up his axe again. "But you will." Samuel walked home through the snow, Ezekiel's words echoing in his mind. The cabin came into view, smoke rising from its chimney into the gray sky. Through the window, he could see Rebecca moving about inside, and the sight of her, alive, warm, safe for now, steadied something in him. 5 days until midnight. 5 days until he learned what price survival really demanded. Inside, Rebecca looked up as he entered. The question was written on her face. "He'll come," Samuel said. She nodded, relief and dread mixing in her expression. Prudence emerged from behind the curtain, her face pale and drawn. She looked at Samuel, then away, and said nothing. The 5 days that followed passed in tense silence. They rationed what food remained. They prayed. Even Samuel, though he wasn't sure anymore if anyone was listening. They prepared. On December 27th, Samuel checked over the wagon, reinforced its bed, greased the wheels. He selected their strongest horse, a bay gelding named Constance, and made sure the harness was sound. He cleaned his rifle, though he hoped he wouldn't need it. He sharpened his knife. Rebecca watched him work, her hand resting on her belly. She'd started showing more in the past week, or perhaps he was just noticing it more now. The reality of what was coming, both in 5 days and in 7 months, pressed down on him like the weight of winter itself. That night, as they lay in bed, Rebecca spoke into the darkness. "Whatever happens tomorrow night, Samuel, whatever you see or do, remember that you did it for us, for our child. That has to count for something. Does it?" He stared at the ceiling. "Or does doing wrong for the right reasons just make it worse?" "I don't know." Her voice was small. "But I know I would rather live with that question than die without asking it." Samuel pulled her close, felt her heart beating against his chest. Outside, the wind howled, and somewhere in the darkness, midnight was waiting. December 28th dawned cold and clear. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Prudence avoided looking at him. Rebecca moved through her routines with quiet determination. Samuel checked the wagon 3 times, the harness 4. As darkness fell, Ezekiel arrived. He brought rope, blankets, and a grim expression that needed no words. Samuel kissed Rebecca goodbye. She held him tight, her face buried in his chest. "Come back to me," she whispered. "Always," he promised, and hoped it was a promise he could keep. He and Ezekiel set out into the night, the wagon creaking beneath them, Constance's breath misting in the frozen air. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the snow-covered landscape. Neither man spoke. There was nothing to say. Marsh Creek was 5 miles south, deep in territory Samuel had never explored. They followed a narrow trail that wound through dense forest, the trees pressing close on either side. Once, Samuel thought he heard movement in the darkness, footsteps, or maybe just his imagination. They arrived at Marsh Creek with 10 minutes to spare. It was a desolate place, a frozen stream cutting through a small clearing. No buildings, no signs of habitation, just snow and ice and darkness, and 3 wooden crates, sitting in the middle of the clearing like they'd been placed by ghosts. Samuel and Ezekiel exchanged a glance. The older man's face was unreadable. "Help me load them," Ezekiel said quietly. The crates were heavy, far heavier than they should have been for their size. Samuel's back strained as they lifted the first one into the wagon. It shifted as they moved it, and something inside made a sound. Not quite a thud, not quite a scrape. Something that made the hair on the back of Samuel's neck stand up. "Don't," Ezekiel said, seeing Samuel's expression. "Don't think about it. Just load them." They loaded the second crate, the third. As Samuel was securing the ropes, he noticed something. A dark stain on the side of one crate, barely visible in the moonlight. It looked like Samuel. Ezekiel's voice was sharp. "We're done here. Let's go." But Samuel had already seen it, had already recognized it. Blood. The stain was blood. He looked up at Ezekiel, his mouth dry. The older man's face was grim. "Miller's Crossing," Ezekiel said. "By dawn. That's the job." "Ezekiel, what's in these crates?" "Nothing we're going to talk about. Nothing we're going to think about. Nothing that concerns us beyond getting them where they need to go." Ezekiel climbed onto the wagon. "Now let's move before someone sees us." Samuel stood frozen, staring at the blood stain, at the 3 crates that were too heavy and made wrong sounds when they shifted, at the choice he'd already made and couldn't unmake. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Samuel climbed onto the wagon beside Ezekiel, took the reins, and drove into the darkness, carrying cargo he couldn't name and wouldn't forget, no matter how hard he tried.
Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures. Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures.